Yeah, yo, live from studio, what is this, 4F, from the studios, SIC TV, located somewhere in beautiful downtown, I don't know, they had a hood on my head on the way over here. It's the Mandrake radio show, even though it's on TV, go figure, starring Lionel Mandrake and his co-host Matt Murdock, who happens to be my twin brother. I'm Mike Murdock, filling in for Niles French, who needed a break from this zoo, along with SIC TV Orchestra, inviting you to join my homies and their guest. What guest? They didn't give me a guest list. How am I supposed to tell them who the guests are without a guest list? What kind of low-budget operation is this? What do I know? I'm just a temp. Anyway, here's Mandrake. Get in here, cuz. I'm out. Where do I get paid?
The check is in the mail. Hello, everybody out there. Welcome. Thank you, Mike. That was Mike Murdock. He's filling in for his brother, who's coming in right now, Matt. Thank you very much to the loyal followers of the Lionel Mandrake radio program. And I am your host, Lionel Mandrake.
Thanks, bro. Appreciate it. See you back at the hacienda. Oh, by the way, he was filling in for Niles French, not for me. I'm here, so how can he be filling in for me?
Thank you very much. Well, thank you so much to the audience out there. A lot of news in the cycle today on this
Yeah, we haven't been here
week.
for 2 weeks, so we got lots of catching up to do.
We certainly do. People, there's a lot of trouble in the world today, and it will not go away. It seems that those on the progressive left, also known as the communist left, also known as the alt-left media,
also known as the neoliberals.
The neo, and they're more than just liberals, they're neo-leftists, are trying to take down President
Radicals.
Trump's presidency. And I think that it's high time that, as Mr. Steve Bannon said, who was a primary advisor to President Trump, that the alt media, that is the corporate globalist media, is out there, and they are in full form trying to take down President Trump. And the question that I have for everybody out there is, when is it going to end, and what is it going to take to stop this madness? Because as a country, we need to be unified. George Soros is behind a lot of these protests. He's planting people. First, we had fake news. Now we have fake protesters who are going into these Republican areas and trying to pretend that they're Republicans protesting the Republican agenda. And I think it's about time the fake news stops and the fake protesting stops and the fake outrage and the double standard stops, because without a country, without borders, and without law and order, we have anarchy.
And it's not just Soros. Now, you know, the newest player in all this, actually he's been a player all along, but he has a new role, is our now former president, Barack Hussein Obama. Yes, I'm using that name now. And this new organization that he has, a lot of people are calling it a shadow government that's dedicated to the proposition of trying to obstruct anything that President Trump does. Under the name of, trying to preserve his legacy.
Mr. Murdoch, not only is the former President Obama, and thank God he's out of office after 8 years, not only is he now undergoing a transformation from the nice guy in the White House with the good smile to like a puppet master, orchestrating groups of people to go out and protest actively against the president, who's only had 1 month in order to get his agenda in place, to start getting his people, his nominees, confirmed, and to try and reverse a lot of the problems that have resulted over 8 years, not just with Obama that originated with his presidency, but even problems before Obama was elected. He's out there trying to undermine President Trump, and we have to think now, is it seditious for a former president to be in the background, if he's in the background, because there's no confirmation that he's really in the back trying to handle this whole shadow government kind of thing that they're talking about, deep government, in order to affect, disruptions and obstacles for President Trump, which I think I wouldn't put it past him.
Well, based on what we know so far, it's like, okay, it's the public role, the public face of what he's doing is trying to, basically what he's doing is going back to his old community organizer roots. What he's trying to do now is be like a supreme,
leader, like North Korea almost.
He's trying to be like the supreme leader of community organizers now, only now with the clout of being a former president. president, to add, legitimacy to what he's doing.
This is not something that we've ever seen before. When you have
This
presidents,
is unprecedented.
it's a new phenomenon.
For a former president immediately after leaving office. Most former presidents, they just ride off into the sunset and stay out of the fray.
At least for a year or two or three, until something that they have to mention, give a little moral support to or a little opinion to in an interview, they will say something. But Mr. Murdoch, I have to say this into the audience out there, which camera straight ahead. I want to say to the liberals, the leftists, and the progressives out there, look, we don't engage in fake news like your side does. CNN, the Clinton News Network, MSNBC, the New York Times, the Washington Post, and all the rest of you fake news people out there. We try to be fair. Let us be fair. We don't know if President Barack Hussein Obama is out there trying to undermine President Trump, but it seems that this is the case. Now, I ask you people out there, and then Mr. Murdoch is going to expound on it, what is going on when you have Republican, meetings where there are political meetings just in the various, television I've been watching, where the audience is all of a sudden stacked with disgruntled Republicans who are complaining about immigration, of deportations, of the Affordable Care Act and how great it was. And they're acting and pretending to be Republicans, but it seems like they're really leftist Democrat plants inside of these groups who are trying to give disinformation and almost hijack the narrative.
Okay, now let me say in the interest of fairness. Now, they may not all be fake Republicans pretending to be Republicans, because there are some Republicans who aren't, bona fide fans of our president and his policies.
You're talking about like the great war hero John McCain. He goes to another country in Germany, in Munich, and he's talking bad about President Trump. He's saying, well, we have to have a free and open press, and anything other than that is treason. Who the hell is John McCain, who had his moment in glory, who did his time in the Hanoi Hilton, and let us give him his respect, but who the hell is he to stand there and say bad things about our president at this time in a foreign country?
And it's not just not being a loyal member of the Republican Party. This goes beyond that. This is just not being a loyal person to
a citizen,
to our commander-in-chief.
We're talking.
I think a lot of this stems from, now we all remember what happened during the campaign when President Trump said some not so complimentary things about the senator from Arizona, and some of it may have been over the line, but let's face it, McCain is showing how thin-skinned he is in the way he's been reacting.
He was a presidential candidate. He's a failed presidential candidate. I don't want to
twice failed presidential candidate.
Oh, that's right. When did he run?
He ran. Remember,
against Obama.
That was the second time. The first time he ran and fell short in the primaries against George W. Bush.
Right, I remember that. And then he wasn't there some swift voting involved? And that was with
what happened was, McCain actually because I remember that very well, and I was living in South Carolina at the time. This is how I vividly remember this. McCain seemed to be on the brink of getting the nomination until right before the South Carolina primary. He made a statement, taking the Republican Party to task for being too, dependent on the religious right vote. And South Carolina is a very religious state, and I noticed from having been there, and that did not go over very well. Next thing you know, South Carolina went overwhelmingly for Bush, and that was pretty much the end for McCain.
I made a mistake. Bush was being swift voted, and I think that was by Mike Wallace, who was a reporter at the time, who was giving disinformation about his military service.
No, actually, that happened during the Bush presidency when Dan Rather did that, and it turned out to be false information, and it cost Rather his job.
Right. Thank you for correcting me on that. So Dan Rather, what's he doing these days? Have you heard anything from Dan Rather, who I guess would be called a fake news connoisseur and purveyor, although they didn't have that term back when he did this?
Well, last I heard, he was working for some fly-by-night internet news service. Now
he's still alive though, so Dan Rather hasn't passed.
Yeah, but it's like his fall from grace was such that most people don't even know that he's barely still in the news business now.
Right. Dan Rather used to be sort of a staple in the mainstream news media.
Oh, he was one of the major players.
Was he on NBC?
He was on CBS.
CBS can't be stopped, huh? Well, they've been stopped because the people today can't stand.
Never heard that one before.
The mainstream media today has lost its reputation as being somewhat, neutral arbiters of sort of information
Well, see, that's just
from a sort of neutral perspective.
Well, see, that's just it.
It's too much bias today.
Yeah, ever since the 2016 election, they're not even bothering to pretend to be impartial and unbiased anymore.
Well, they didn't bother to pretend to be unbiased and impartial during the presidential election of Barack Hussein Obama when he first.
Oh,
ran.
they were fully in the tank for him,
as they were for Hillary Rodham Clinton, who is still in the background, and she's like an oracular voice who sends. Like an oracle, she's there, and every once in a while she'll send out a tweet, or she'll be seen somewhere in a restaurant talking to somebody. For example, the last time she was spotted eating, it was in a restaurant in New York City, and she was sitting with the people who do the Saturday night live skit making fun of the presidential spokesperson. And sort of imitating him.
Sean Spicer.
Sean Spicer.
The
so
press secretary.
She was talking to the people who actually play that role. It's a woman, and she was spotted like 2 weeks ago. I think,
she was the second choice. You know who the first choice was to play that role?
No.
Rosie O'Donnell. I think Rosie would have made an excellent choice.
Just calling
for reasons that should be obvious.
For calling her Rosie, I mean, it's almost like she's a nice lady. She's fair. She's the kind of person that you could sit down and have a civil conversation with. But to me, she's sort of in the same category as Michael Moore. They're angry people who have really sharpened their knives, and they have an agenda against really conservatives, against people who don't want their children going into bathrooms where anyone and anybody who thinks they're any other gender than what they are biologically can just walk into. They're trying to force an agenda of left-wing, I think, extremism on the rest of the overwhelming number of people in this country who just want to be left alone from the progressive leftist agenda, which seems to focus on LGBT, transgender, gay, and curious rights. Can't we be left alone in our bathrooms anymore, Ms. Clinton?
And trying to push an agenda of inclusiveness of illegal immigrants, forgetting the key word being illegal, making it sound like anybody who's against illegal immigrants is against all immigrants, period. When that reminds me of something I wanted to bring up, okay? I read something the other day that said, okay, all right, all these people who are harping on that bandwagon, no thank you, harping on that bandwagon talking about how everybody who's against the illegals is racist, guess who a large percentage of the people who are opposed to illegal immigration and in favor of President Trump's policies regarding that subject, guess who a large percentage, and I don't remember the exact percentage, what it was, but a huge percentage of those who are in agreement with what President Trump is trying to do are legal immigrants who happen to be Latino.
Latinos, right. I spoke to
because they're upset. It's okay, like, we did it the right way. We played the game by the rules, and we did what was necessary and, made whatever sacrifices were necessary. We went through the process, and now all of a sudden you're going to tell us that these illegals are getting a free pass when we did it the right way, and they're entitled to the same benefits and all that. Yeah, they are very upset.
Something,
the liberal news media will not tell you this.
Murdoch, it's almost a platitude, and it doesn't need to be said, but there are a lot of good, hardworking people who are immigrants who did it the right way in this country. They're
welcome. We don't care who you are, where you come from. If you went through the process and you're willing to assimilate and become citizens like people in the past used to do, you're totally welcome. We don't care who you are.
These people who are in the country from other places all around the world today are like, what is happening to America? It's anarchy. There's no law and order. Anarchy is defined as the selective enforcement of laws or not enforcing laws. Today we have sanctuary cities where in Miami or in Florida, there was one sanctuary city where the mayor said, you know what? We are going to enforce President Trump's and the federal laws about immigration and holding people for ICE to be picked up if it warrants on retainers because it's the law. And he's not going to be losing federal funding. But there are a lot of cities out there, whether it's in California or if sanctuary cities up in Connecticut, like this mayor from Connecticut. He was on last night talking with Tucker Carlson, and he was talking about how He doesn't want to hold people because he doesn't want to be doing the federal government's job. Is this governor of Connecticut insane? What would it take for him to simply give ICE a sufficient amount of time to come and pick up people who are being held on immigration violation retainers, which usually have to do with serious felonies, not with somebody being pulled over and for going through a red light. These are felons that are being released by the mayors of these sanctuary cities and governors of various states, like in Colorado, where you have in Denver sanctuary city status. And what about in San Francisco, where Kate Steinle was shot by an illegal, not undocumented
Let's stress that,
people.
illegal. Yeah.
Illegal. It's illegal to be in this country without your paperwork, broken into the country, and then committing crimes makes it twice as bad. And yet a mayor or a governor of a state, a mayor of a city is going to say, no, it's okay, you can stay. What about the safety of the citizens? And we're talking newcomers, people from other parts of the world who have done their citizenship the correct way, or maybe in the process of completing the work that it takes 4 or 5 years to become a U.S. citizen. And believe me, I understand the difficulties of doing it because I've been involved in citizenship with
it's not
relatives.
an overnight deal. Never
it's a
has
lot
been.
of work, and if you make a mistake, they will automatically send you a letter that says, you are charged with violating immigration law and you have to leave the country if you make a mistake on your paperwork. I've seen the letter. It makes your blood run cold for making a mistake filing the wrong form. For example, a $500 form. Not only will they not give you the $500 back, we're talking about the U.S. Immigration Services, but they will send you a letter saying that you're in violation of immigration law and you have to self-deport. Now, what about people who are going through that stress, whether they're from Mexico or if they're from, parts of the third world? And by that I mean around the world, the Middle East, Africa, China, Taiwan, wherever these people come from, because they want a better life. A better life does not include a country that does not obey and follow the law. That's anarchy. We're talking about gang members. There's one cause celeb over there in California where they were going after a 8-time deportee who came back to the United States. ICE raided his house. The father was taken into custody, and the son, who because of his gang affiliation, self-professed, was taken into custody. And now you have these leftist, liberal rabble-rousers out there trying to say, well, why should he be deported? Because he was a dreamer. He's a 23-year-old dreamer with gang tattoos all over him, and they don't want him deported. This is anarchy.
Because apparently, to the radical left, there's no such thing as lawbreakers.
No.
It's like just hold hands, say kumbaya, and just let everybody in, and let them do whatever the heck they want, and the consequences be damned. And it's amazing how much, and then. That's just one side of it. Then, of course, what's going on with the migrant refugees that they want to let into the country, and we see what happens in places like Sweden and Paris when you let that go unchecked. Which, incidentally, have you noticed that the American mainstream media seems to be lowballing that story? You hardly hear a peep about how the fact that Sweden and France are practically war zones now. But you don't hear anything about that. They just the American media is sweeping that under the rug instead of reporting it like the major catastrophic story that it is. Now, they would rather spend all their time concentrating on how terrible Donald Trump is and how much of a mistake it was to have him as our president, have him elected as our president, and trying to do everything they can to try to ruin his presidency to make sure he's a failed president.
You know something, Murdoch? I think the viewers of our small show that is broadcast from an undisclosed location, and for good
we're up
reason,
to 90 viewers now, by the way. Hadn't had an update in a while.
No, we have more viewers than that. As I look here right now at the moment, we have approximately 329.
Whoa, I have been out of the loop. Okay.
329.
Welcome, all of you.
And
send money.
No, we're not going to try and solicit funding. We just have a message.
Speak for yourself.
We have a message that we want to get out there. And the message is this, that there are forces in the world that seek the undoing and transformation of Western civilization. Western civilization has everything to do with the West, with the nations of the West, the ancient nation states of Europe, with the United States of America, its culture, its heritage, its traditions, and its history. And that's rapidly being undone globally. It also includes Australia, which is under a migrant siege. What is it about migrants? It must be like a business, because if it wasn't a business, it wouldn't be promoted the way it is globally in the Western world, not in the Eastern world, not in China, not in Russia. And I know people would say Russia is part of the West, kind of, if you look at Russia as being, the third Rome that they kind of consider themselves. But the rest of the world is not importing alien cultures with no time to assimilate them, almost as if they're on a death march to national suicide. Enough of the migrants. And listen, President Trump is correct. We can, meaning the government, the United States government, could better spend their money and better help the people from this region by creating safe zones in the Middle East, for example, in Saudi Arabia, which is very rich, in Jordan, which is rich enough, in the United Arab Emirates, and in places in their part of the world so that these people can be protected. But that's not the business policy. The business policy is let's flood the West, let's flood Germany with migrants at the behest of that criminal Angela Merkel, who didn't ask her people if they wanted 1.2 million Syrians, so-called, and they're not all Syrians by far, and they're not women and children by far, coming into Germany and causing chaos. And from Germany, they're going to Norway and to Sweden. And because of Sweden's suicidal social policies, they are well on the way to becoming a minority in their own country. Look at Malmo. There are 17 million Swedes living in Sweden, and just last year alone, they accepted almost 1 million people from the Middle East. And the people of Sweden, believe it or not, Murdoch, they don't want to fight back. They think that they are the superpower of humanitarianism, they're out there to help the whole rest of the world. And you know what that is? That's nihilism. It's self-destruction. And it's orchestrated.
This is the same country, the same people who have always prided themselves as being the neutral, the pacifist. We don't get involved in the world's wars and all this stuff. And they let all these people in, and now it's become a virtual war zone itself.
Isn't it a joke
am I the only one that sees the irony in that?
Murdoch, let me just summarize it very in a form of satire. Welcome to the Lionel Mandrake radio program. And right now we're having a television commercial, and this is the commercial. An all-expense-paid trip to Paris, France, right now. In fact, it's deep discounted, 80% off. Get on a plane, land in Paris, and find out what the surrounding values and these local areas that are no-go zones really look like. There were some people from Korea, South Korea, their whole bus was hijacked over in France. And this was last week. I read about it. All right, maybe it wasn't the whole bus, but it was most everybody on the bus. Gunmen came on, and they robbed the entire bus of their property. These were South Korean tourists. They're not going back to France. You want to go to Sweden? Sure, the entire country is not bad, but the main cities are. Remember, the French Revolution didn't begin all over France. It just happened in the capital city of Paris. And from this seat of power, you can then use your spider webs and get out and affect the local legislation and laws all throughout the country. But Paris is not Paris anymore, any more than London is really a city that I think that would be recognizable to, let us say, to Winston Churchill back in the 1950s. I mean, you could say it's diverse, you could say it's multicultural, but it really is a disaster. And when you look at Sweden as being the rape capital of the world. Is it possible? Did I hear that right?
That's what I've been hearing.
The rape capital of the world. What is it about raping women? I mean, all through Europe, you never heard of this as a Western phenomenon, at least not until maybe the time of the Vikings, who were known for raping and pillaging and looting, but not in modern Western civilization in the 20th and 21st centuries. This is not something that belongs in our culture, but these filthy, lying politicians with ties and long skirts sitting there trying to give us complex ideas in order to confuse us so that we don't believe the evidence of our own eyes about the crime, about the no-go zones, about the riots and the burning of vehicles by the hundreds in France and Sweden and Norway. Are you kidding me?
And the refusal to accept and live under the laws of the countries that they, for lack of a better term, have invaded and want to say, no, we don't live by your laws. We live by this law. And
I have to disagree, Mr. Murdoch.
Okay, go ahead.
Listen, a family member of mine told me once, if somebody spits on you and tells you it's raining, good for you if you think it's raining. These people have been deluded. It's been 40 and 50 years of socialist social conditioning to make people of these rich Western nations feel obligated to opening up their borders under the false siren call of diversity and multiculturalism. Oh, and if you don't agree with that, you're a racist. Look, these people
And a
fleeing
fascist.
these countries are creating the very conditions within the countries that they are imported to that they just fled. It's not a good thing. Look, if you want to import some people, shouldn't there be an economic purpose for that? Or a business reason for that? Or an intellectual reason for that? Perhaps you want the best and the brightest that the world has to offer, and not the dregs of humanity who are going into these different countries and creating obvious social costs and problems and violence. And the indigenous imprisoned population of these islands, let's say England, or if you go throughout Europe, and I would call different nations of Europe islands. They're islands in the middle of the great European project, the European Union, and they have no say. It comes out of Brussels by unelected officials whose, I think, very rule is autocratic, unelected, and tyrannical, and it's illegitimate.
Which is why you're now starting to see this Brexit movement. That's what that's
Brexit
coming
is done.
from.
England is England again, I suppose, because England, the United Kingdom, will never be England. It doesn't have the colonies anymore. But the United Kingdom said, you know what? We can do way better without being part of this entire super state that doesn't give us the right to say who we want to bring into our own home. Listen, England is not a big landmass.
No.
It's pretty damn small. And let me tell you something. If you want to talk about Greenland, Greenland, the country of Hungary is like 1/3 the size of Greenland, which has about 80,000 people living there. So we're talking about pretty relatively small countries that are being forced to take people. Look, we're not talking about the Catholics of the Protestants arguing. Basically, they had a common religion, which was Christianity, a belief in the Trinity, a belief in the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. So there was a commonality of religion, although they were different sects. And there was a commonality of European culture and shared experiences and history. The people now come from what was once written, I believe, by Tennyson, east is east and west is west, and neither the twain shall meet. In other words, we're talking two distinct civilizations, and the leftist liberals want you to believe that they can really coexist peacefully. Well, if you really want to look at the product and the results and indeed the evidence of your own eyes, then it's not working. And time is of the essence. Demographics is of the essence. And the leftist elites in Brussels are still getting paid a king's ransom in order to sell their own people out. It's disgusting. And the people had better wise up because they're going to lose their country. And they're going to lose their culture. And look, the Russians said it the other day in Munich. Their ambassador said, we're in a post-Western world right now. The world order has changed. There is no West order anymore because it has failed. It has failed because of the socialists. These are bad people, man.
And at the same time, what you got going on in this country are people of that stripe politically who now want to have the same thing here. And it's like it's like the whole, it's the whole snowflake, concept.
I disagree. I don't want to call them snowflakes. They're criminals. They are really anarchists and destroyers of civilization. To call them snowflakes is almost like making a joke out of it. These are real scum people who want to destroy.
Well, I think they're delusional in that, at least the image they try to put forth is, if we just stretch out our hands and show these people that we're tolerant and accepting of them, they will love us and they will not try to harm us. And then meanwhile, what's going to happen in reality is when there's enough of them over here to try to do what they want to do, whose heads are going to be chopped off first?
You know something? I spoke to somebody yesterday who's a hardworking man. Came from Mexico. He's been in this country since the 1980s. His children were born here. He worked hard. He fixes houses and homes. Guess what? Guess what he said to me?
What did he say?
And I did not solicit this. I'm going to call him Pablo because I'm trying to protect his identity. I spoke to Pablo. We were talking about the way society is, just society, not globally, not what's happening in the world. I was saying to him, you know, Pablo, when I'm out in the street sometimes, I feel that society's become less civil. People are not polite. There's so much rudeness and abruptness in a way that I don't recall ever having. There's no civility. There's no sophistication in a lot of ways. You go into a supermarket and you see the way almost the society has been dumbed down and made much more coarse. And from that comes violent tendencies, whether it's like passive aggressiveness or foul language or all the rest of the things that make America sort of not the country that I grew up in. And he said to me, he came from another country south of the border, and he said, you know something, I agree with you there. I mean, you go out in the street, you can't say anything to these kids today. They don't want to hear it. They think they know everything. And they're dangerous.